Let's be brutally honest right now. That's a big question.
I'm looking for someone who doesn't want to go to base camp, but they want to go to the very top.
Whether it's here, India, New York.
Civilization was born at happy hour.
That's what wins. That's what stands out. That's what people are interested in. That's what I want to know. The Hospopreneurs Podcast with James Henderson.
Hello and welcome to episode 147 of the Hospopreneurs Podcast. From senior software developer to CEO, Colin Winning has worked his way up the ranks at ResDiary for the past 10 years, already having acquired a decade of experience before joining the company. His strong technical foundation and hard work have allowed him to flourish and now lead the Glaswegian reservation platform. I'll also briefly note that ResDiary was acquired by Accor in 2018. I hope you enjoy the episode today. So that we can keep the lights on, there's a company I'd like to share with you. It's called Access Collins. They're the only fully integrated end-to-end system on the market for comprehensive booking and event management. Their platform is helping operators increase foot traffic, maximize revenue, tackle no-shows, and save many hours each week through automation. Find out more at bit.ly/hospo sponsor. Hello and welcome to the show, Colin.
Hi James, really good to be here. Thanks for having me on the show today.
You're most welcome. I'm really excited to have you on. We were having a quick chat before the interview and I mentioned that I actually had a functions manager who showed me ResDiary a long time ago now, and it was the first time that I engaged with your software, and the business has changed an incredible amount, not just since I found out what the business was about, but long before that. And you were actually there many moons ago as a senior software developer and then working up now to be the CEO on your own. You were a joint CEO, and I'm sure some incredible things have happened along the way. I'm really excited to open that up with you today. So thank you. Without further ado though, Colin, I'd love to ask you the first question that I ask on the program, and that's a crazy hospitality story or exceptional hospitality experience. So what have you got for the program today?
Yeah, sure. I don't have quite the tale of the £200,000 bottle of wine that someone else came on your show talking about, but probably quite a unique experience rather than crazy, I think. So I celebrated my 40th about 9 years ago, so I'm getting close to the next big one. But myself and my best man for my wedding both celebrated 40ths in the same year, and our wives decided to take us away for the weekend, which was quite exciting. They decided to keep the whole thing secret as to where we were going, so took us on a magical mystery tour of Scotland, and we ended up in a small village called Torridon, which is in the northwest of Scotland. And it's one of the most beautiful places in Scotland. The scenery is absolutely amazing. And when we got there, we kind of wondered why we were here. But then right on the banks of Loch Torridon is this beautiful hotel. And it used to be an old hunting lodge back in the day, but it kind of like castle stroke hunting lodge. And it's amazing that just the setting of it is beautiful. So we got there and we stayed the weekend there. And just the experience was absolutely amazing. It was just what you would want from a weekend away. The staff being so welcoming, the luxurious rooms, the food served, which is direct from the farm. So they've got their own farm, they breed their own cattle and pigs and things like that. And just the whole experience was great, and just topped off the sort of last evening with whiskey served from the whiskey room. And it's one of these whiskey rooms where it's floor-to-ceiling whiskies, and someone who really knows what they're talking about can recommend whiskies for you. So that was an amazing experience, and one I'd really love to repeat at some point. So not dropping any hints to anyone.
What an incredible experience. Thank you for sharing that with us, Colin. I normally ask from here why you do what you do. So ultimately, what is it that really inspires you, that makes you get up and do each day? We're recording this interview at the start of your Wednesday and the end of mine. I'd love to know what gets you out of bed every morning to be achieving these sorts of things for a business like ResDiary.
You probably want to go back quite a bit. I'll try not to give you my whole life story, but when I was younger, probably about 10, I received my first computer, which was a ZX Spectrum. It's probably too old for you to maybe know what that is, but it was a UK company that created sort of cheap computers for the house. So I had one of these things, and it used to be attached to an old tape recorder, which would load the games, and it would take about 5 to 10 minutes to do that. But I absolutely loved it. And one of the things I got from that was that you could actually write code to tell the computer what to do. And I think that was probably my first experience of doing some programming. It's probably a bit different writing Sinclair Basic and a ZX Spectrum back in the day than it is to what the guys are using today to write ResDiary, but that's probably what set me on my path to where I am. The early part of my career, I worked for a number of different software houses in and around Glasgow, and we tended to work most on sort of bespoke software for companies. And that would go from a time off and lose system for a nuclear power station where people work shifts all the time, to a system for hospitals to record and schedule operations. And I loved all that. It was like about finding solutions to problems for people through computers. So, that was good, but all the projects were relatively short. They had a short shelf life. And so I jumped around from job to job. I really wasn't sort of hugely fulfilled, I guess. And one day I got a call from a guy I used to work with, and he was working for this company called ResDiary. He was their technical director. It was a kind of strange name. I was wondering what ResDiary actually did. So I had a chat with him, and I came in and I met the founder, who was Mike. And I just was really impressed with what they were doing. I could really see how it was a product rather than just a project, and how it was really sort of helping the working lives of people that were using ResDiary. And I thought, this is actually what I really get interested in, and as you say, get out of bed for in the morning. So I decided to take a bit of a punt and joined ResDiary. Just while I was doing that, the guy who I knew actually decided to leave. So I joined as senior software developer, and here I am now, almost 11 years later, still working for ResDiary. And I guess you probably want to know what got me hooked. So the ability to help people in what is an extremely analog industry. So I think that, restaurants traditionally would probably be pen and paper, writing down names and numbers of people that were coming into the restaurant, finding tables for them, making sure you had enough staff, all of that kind of thing. I could actually see the way that ResDiary would really help manage that whole experience for people. So make it about the experience for diners rather than being the problems that the restaurant managers and staff would be having to deal with. And, this was the sort of vision, I guess, that Mike had when he started ResDiary. He was an old restaurateur. So that was really what got me interested. The other thing that I'd sort of experienced throughout my career was wherever I worked, I never felt that there was any investment in people. So you basically went in the morning, worked from 9 till 5, did the job, got paid, and then went home. So I never came across a company that did training. There was no real collaboration. So ideas came from the top and you did what you were told, no creativity. So what I found out, myself included, people tended to move on, very little loyalty. And I didn't really want that for ResDiary when I came on board. So I feel that one of the most important things about the company is its people. So ResDiary, I think we'll maybe go into this in a wee bit more detail later on, but ResDiary is an amazing team. And I really want to look after them and give them a reason for why do they do what they want to do. So I think that's probably about me before I go rambling on.
That's okay. And it's good to hear more about your background. So I appreciate you fleshing that out a lot more. I might take a step back and look at it more broadly, just to cover this for listeners who aren't aware, and they will have heard just in the intro before, but tell us about ResDiary and your pitch for what ResDiary is.
So it was born out of frustration by Mike Conyers. He was a restaurateur in Glasgow, owned restaurants, and was frustrated about having to do the sort of manual management of people coming into the restaurants and dealing with them. So he had this vision that he could get someone to write some software for him that would help to improve or control the yield coming into restaurants. So controlling the number of people that were coming in different times of the day, which would mean a smoother sort of kitchen operation and also serving operation as well. So it would mean that he could deal with customers and give them a really exceptional moment or experience, and they wouldn't have to deal with overwhelmed kitchens, stressed staff and unhappy customers. So ResDiary essentially was a table management system or reservation management system. It would allow people to take booking widget on their website. So the first sort of online presence for people. So get bookings coming into their restaurant. It would manage the yield by but showing them different time slots if time slots weren't available. And it's really sort of evolved from there to being a sort of a suite of tools for restaurateurs. And we provide everything from discovery now. So our Dishcult consumer portal provides the ability for people to find restaurants and book them. And we do lots of other things as well. But in essence, we're a sort of booking management or reservation management software.
Yeah. And just for some perspective, over those 11 years that you've been with the business, you were a small team at the beginning, then to now, what scale are we looking at? How many businesses are on board with your software?
So when I came on board, we were probably a few hundred restaurants that used ResDiary. You can imagine the sort of spread of how it worked with ResDiary. So it was a Glasgow company in Scotland. And it sort of started to spread out from there. So across Edinburgh, other bits of Scotland, down through the UK. And we started to utilise resellers in different regions. So Norway and Indonesia were our first resellers. And then obviously when we went into Australia, we partnered with another company called Restaurant Diary Australia. And they eventually passed over the licence to Dimmy. So at our peak, we probably had about 10,500, 11,000 restaurants using ResDiary. I think through the pandemic and lockdowns, it's quite difficult to get an accurate number just now, but we're probably somewhere in the region of 8,000. We see about 8,000 active restaurants, and we call an active restaurant those that are taking bookings within the last 14, 28 days. So yeah, about 8,000 just now.
Yeah, fantastic. And you mentioned Dimmy there. Now, Stephen Promutico has been on the show a couple of times, actually, and that relationship would have been built in that time and has unfortunately ended these days. And some other changes have taken place as well. And Richard isn't with the business as a co-CEO with you anymore, and Mike isn't around. So you're the sole CEO now running the business. Can you tell us about some other changes that have happened, not just within the business, but more broadly that you've seen across the industry? To begin with, more around the subset that you operate within, and we can take that a bit more broadly afterwards.
We started off as very much a B2B player, I guess. We provided software just for restaurants, and it was the ability to booking widgets on their website and to manage the bookings into the restaurant. But there's been quite a lot of changes, I guess, in the industry and the sort of, I guess, the adoption of tech in restaurants. Some of the things that we are seeing now is that we do things like pre-ordering, so pre-ordering of food. We do function inquiries, and the two of these things go well together. So, for example, people will book big functions, for example, at Christmas parties, and the kitchens want to be able to control the food that they're having to order and make. So we do things like pre-orders. So you can send out pre-orders to all the guests coming along. They can decide what food they want to order, and everything can be done in advance. So that's one of the big things that we've done over the last wee while. I mentioned about B2B as well, and we're actually starting to look more about how we can start to drive consumers to restaurants as well. And we've changed from resdiary.com, which was basically a sort of mashup of different restaurant pages, and we've now rebranded that as Dishcult. And Dishcult's our consumer-facing brand, and we've been working with our sister company in Accor to produce that, and I think there'll be lots of good, exciting things coming from Dishcult. But basically, Dishcult becomes a sort of discovery portal for consumers, so we do a lot of content-led stuff to begin with to bring consumers to the portal, and then drive that down into restaurant pages or location pages where people can see what restaurants are available and book them. That's kind of some of the changes. I think there's more obvious changes that have happened over the past sort of 18 months, and that's probably round about ordering and payment and click and collect and delivery. So as areas have gone into lockdown or come out of lockdown, they've been forced to change tack and what they're doing. We've been looking at whether we can help them supply takeout food, and that's worked quite well in some areas, not so well in others. And then that leads into whether people want to do delivery. And I think that people do want to do delivery, but some of the commission charges around about delivery are quite large, with some of the sort of established big players. And then there's also things like vouchers as well. So people selling, or restaurants selling vouchers when they're not open so that they can gain some revenue, and people can then use the vouchers when coming back out of lockdown. So lots of different things changing. I think there's lots of things going on.
In making some of those decisions to adapt within the business, what places are you looking for information to guide those decisions that you're making?
In the past, ResDiary was probably pretty entrepreneurial with Mike leading it. So Mike had a good feel for how restaurants worked and what they would be needing. So it was quite a sort of gut-led business, and I think that certainly something I've looked at doing over the past few years is more about gathering data. We've had between 8 and 10,000 restaurants, using ResDiary. So we do get huge amounts of data from our customers, what bits of the system they're using. But what we've also been doing over the past is more to do with sort of user research. How do we go out to our customers or non-customers and ask them what they're seeing in the industry, what would make their lives easier, what would, allow them to do their jobs better, that kind of thing. That's one of the sort of main approaches we're taking now, is actually talking to people rather than the sort of gut-led approach. And I think that gives us a huge amount of data and insight into what customers are wanting. I guess it's not just about customers as well. It's about what diners are doing. How do diners want to book restaurants? How do they want to find them in the first place? And I think that that's also part of our approach, speaking to lots of people and getting those insights. And from there, it sort of leads into how do we go about designing the system? Do we do mock-ups, wireframes, that kind of thing, go back to people, showing them demos and how they would use it. And that helps us refine our approach for actually going in to do the development work.
I do ask this question a lot with a lot of people on the program. How do you know what to listen to and what not to listen to or to ignore after you receive that feedback?
Traditionally, we've been powered by hospitality people, so we tend to bring on a lot of hospitality people into our company. So they maybe got to the point where they don't want to do late hours or whatever, but are hugely experienced in hospitality, and we brought them into the business. So we do actually have a lot of good knowledge and experience internally. So I think that probably helps us. For me, it's all about testing what we're planning and doing, and you can do things like A/B testing to get things out, to test them quickly, to see what people do with them, how they react to them. And that's really, I guess, how we go about doing things.
What is it that you're testing now, that you're learning about, or that you're wanting to find an answer to at the moment?
Yeah, quite a lot going on just now. I think that there's certainly a lot coming from Dish Cult, and it's about what diners actually want to do. How do they want to find restaurants? I think that a lot of booking portals are sort of place where people go book a restaurant and never go back to. We saw that originally with ResDiary.com. So we're doing quite a lot of work there. It's how do we grab the attention of consumers and really get them to continue to come back. I can't say too much about what's happening in the future with Dish Cult because we're still working on it, and there'll be a release coming over the next sort of quarter or two, which will add some seriously good functionality to Dish Cult. So that's one of the things we're working on in terms of ResDiary. I don't know whether you know, but we now have a product called ResDiary Lite, which we are trying to get out into the market. And that's a sort of light offering of ResDiary. And it's more geared towards people who use pen and paper and want to start having an online presence and taking bookings from different channels. And that's one of the things that we're working on as well.
You said you've got to focus on data and being a large business now and having the backing of, a very large international company like Accor. I can imagine that you have access to more resources than you did back in, to describe it in the same sort of way, in those more ground floor entrepreneurial days. What sort of data are you looking to when you are actually making those decisions, some of the higher level decisions, rather than just what feedback you're getting from customers and then applying that? What sort of qualitative stuff are you using? Are you looking to other models overseas, or are there some things that you're looking to when you do apply those things?
Yeah, you mentioned models overseas. We've recently moved into Australia independently, and it's what may have worked in the UK doesn't necessarily work in Australia. And we do have, as you say, we're now part of the Accor group, so we do have access to other resources to help us inform our decisions. We do get lots of data, and it's really just about seeing what competitors or what incumbents are in different markets when we decide to go to them. We work quite closely with Accor now. We've done certain projects with them, and that's really helping us. We get, I guess, a different insight into how people are using ResDiary, what they want, because hotel owners and restaurant owners are maybe slightly different, maybe not a huge amount, but that's the kind of thing that we're doing just now anyway.
So, Colin, looking forward, what sort of other innovations do you predict could be taking place as we move forward? We've touched on those with your answer there before around some of the adjustments and adaptations that ResDiary has made over the years, and even some other businesses was just sort of touched on in that, a couple of those answers. But what do you see when you try to make these decisions that you're making looking at the future and what sort of changes that are going to take place? What is it that you think is going to be, some of these big changes, and how are you actually adapting for those?
For me, I think the pandemic's been a bit of a game changer, and I think we all know that. I think a lot of businesses came out of the back of the pandemic, and mostly around about sort of order and pay, and I think that that's one of the big changes. We'd sort of talked about order and pay in the UK several years ago and how we could go about implementing that. And I think the problem was always, how do we actually change people's way of thinking and getting them to use some sort of digital method to order and to pay eventually. The reason we were looking at it was the sort of pain points in the experience. And for me, the two pain points were always round about ordering additional things and how do you pay at the end of the meal? Because, it's always a problem trying to get attention of somebody to pay the bill. That's why we were looking at it. And we'd also thought about it from a sort of app point of view. How do you put an app onto people's phones if people don't want to do that? And I think that the pandemic's really changed that. QR codes now throughout the world, not just probably Asia, are very they're an everyday occurrence. We're used to using them in the UK for sort of check-in and check-out of places and for doing track and trace, that kind of thing. And I think that that's really changed things. And ordering and payments is now a sort of everyday occurrence as well. So I think that that's one of the bigger changes. It's how that tech can improve the experience in hospitality. And I think that this comes from a couple of different things. So I've mentioned Accor a few times, but one of the things I see with Accor is how they can improve the experience for hotels. And it's maybe a wee bit out of ResDiary's sphere, but it's all about how tech can improve that. So low touch check-ins and check-outs. So doing through, again, QR codes. How do people do that? Room service as well is something we're seeing now with Accor hotels, and digitising that. So no longer phoning up, but again, scanning a QR code. And then it becomes a sort of order and pay experience that we're seeing in restaurants as well. So for me, these are the sort of types of things that we're seeing. I think that that's only going to get more so. It's all about how tech can improve hospitality for the people working in hospitality so that they can concentrate on guests. That's the sort of main thing for me. The other thing that I guess we're probably seeing is how it can make hospitality more efficient. And that's probably because one of the main things that Australia and UK are having problems with is staffing levels, because people can't travel about anymore. I think that'll probably ease as the restrictions ease. But, how do we make technology do more for less people, I think? And yeah, order and pay, I guess, is one of the main things for me. What we are doing is that I guess we constantly look about and see what competitors are doing, anyone new coming into the market. Is there opportunities there for us? Do we look for mergers, acquisitions, that kind of thing, or partnerships? And we're doing a lot with partnerships just now as well. So I guess integration partnerships as well as strategic partnerships. But it's just a case of keeping an eye on the market and trying to predict how things are going to go over the next few years.
What are you looking for in those acquisition targets? Because there are a lot of earlier stage founders who listen to the show. So what should they be gearing up for with a company like yours, trying to be attractive for that sort of acquisition?
Yeah, I think for me that just now it's about how certainly from a ResDiary point of view, it's about how we can speed the entry into different places. We've always traditionally built everything ourselves, but the way that the market's moving just now is everything has to be done yesterday. So how do we, I guess, accelerate or move into different areas that we would normally develop our way into? So that's what we're looking out for is, I guess, lean startups that have good functionality, but maybe need a bit of a boost from inventory that we have access to now. We've got 8,000 to 10,000 restaurants. We're growing. We're probably putting on about 200 or 300 new venues every month just now. And it's finding the right for ResDiary. How does that fit into our business model? So does the business model fit with us? Do they do the same things? Are they actually wanting to provide a good service for a restaurant, which is, I guess, what our vision is. So yeah, that's what we really look for just now.
Fantastic. So you must be dealing with, and you've described there, some of those looking into the future of the industry, some of these challenges to be possibly overcoming, some quite endemic changes that are taking place within hospitality, but then beyond, much further beyond across other industries as well. I'm interested to know what your point of greatest friction is right now. So what is it that ResDiary is grappling with? It doesn't have to be like an insurmountable challenge, but something that you're overcoming currently.
Yeah, we're trying to recruit and grow quite quickly just now. And recruitment, I think, in lots of different industries is struggling because there isn't that sort of immigration or emigration going on that produces good people from other countries who want to come and experience a new country. So I think we are just changing our tact, I think, is probably a better way of putting it. For example, we'd always try and recruit from Glasgow, Edinburgh for our development team and for our customer success team as well, customer support. We're probably looking a bit more wider now. We were forced into remote working at the start of the pandemic. Everyone managed to do it. Nothing's ground to a halt so far, certainly from our industry, from our perspective. We can open up the talent pool. We've started recruiting some developers from London and England and other places like that as well. And it's about just opening ourselves up to new possibilities. So recruitment's one of the things. It's not a huge issue, but I certainly see it in, the hospitality industry, restaurants having trouble getting people. And I think that's a sort of common pain point just now.
So what does success ultimately look like for ResDiary then? What is it that you're working towards and I guess hope to leave when you decide one day that you want to leave the business?
Yeah, good question. Success has probably changed over the last 18 months. I think maybe a different story back in March as of last year. But For me, we've spent the last 6 months trying to get back to where we were pre-pandemic. And I think I would take that as a success. We've diversified. We've moved into Australia. We've got a team of 17 there, and they're servicing Australia and New Zealand. So success for me, it comes in a number of different things. One of the things that I really want for ResDiary is to get to the point where we are providing a sort of full suite of tools for restaurants to be able to operate more efficiently. I think we do quite a lot of those things just now, but I think we could certainly improve in those things. And then for me, it's about growing the team, making the team successful, making the team happy, working with ResDiary as well. But yeah, I don't think I've got a huge amount more than that.
Yeah. So in developing that team, then, and I can imagine that having been with the business for such a long time, people can trust that your knowledge and skills within the business and more broadly are something that they can rely on moving forward, not just within the business, but in their careers. So how do you foster that culture of growth, of creativity, of feeling happy to work with ResDiary?
If you talk about culture, I think that the last 18 months have been quite difficult for company culture and for growth. I'll just take a step back. I completed an MBA last year in April. So I was coping with running ResDiary and also finishing off this MBA. So it was a project I've been working on for a year to, I guess, write up the end of module assessment. And the project I had been looking at was how to foster a culture of creativity. And, it was how do we do that within ResDiary? I think that I'd touched on it before, that we were quite entrepreneurial before when Mike was running the company, and that's what we had to do to begin with. But I see quite a lot of creativity in our team, and it's how we go about bringing that out of people. So as part of the MBA project I was working on, we were looking at action learning and how that could be brought into a company. So just to give you a wee bit of background about action learning, it's about how you come together as a group. You bring along a problem that's causing you problems, and it's got to be a sort of sticky problem that you're having problems with. So you bring it along to the group, you start talking through the problem, you come up with a bunch of actions, you go away and do the actions, and then you come back to the group and you keep working like that. So that was the type of thing that I tried to introduce to the company, and we'll start to bring back once we start to see some sort of normality returning. But the couple of things that we were working on weren't to do with individual problems. It was how do we bring company problems, bring them to a group, work through what actions we're going to take out of that. And that was all about bringing a sort of more collaborative way of working. And I think if you look at some tech companies, the collaborative way of working is probably more around about sort of product and design and development, and doesn't hugely involve other areas of the company. So this was all about bringing everyone in the company together. And it sort of sounds like a bit of a working group or that kind of thing. But that was the idea. Bring people together collaboratively, get different viewpoints from the business, and then get everyone involved in actually actioning some of these things. So that's one of the things that I would like to get back to. I was really keen on it. It was actually going quite well. We'd involved a couple of sort of more senior members to join the groups as more a sort of motivator to help them, or facilitator, to get them moving and get them actually learning things and to actually perform some actions. It wasn't without its problems, because I think when you bring sort of disparate people together, they maybe don't interact quite as well as you would hope to begin with. But as the projects went on, it really started to become a bit of a success. That was one thing that we were looking at. The other thing that we looked at was a thing we called a techathon, and that was more about bringing product design, development together, sort of throwing them up in the air and see where they landed in teams. And they came up with ideas about projects they wanted to work over a 2-week period. And we introduced that to the company. They went away for 2 weeks and we had regular catch-ups with them. It wasn't necessarily about things that related to ResDiary, but the idea was to try and produce a bit of creativity and innovation in the company. And I think it did that, because what we took from it was the best bits of some of the projects, started to put them together. I think you'd probably call that creative swiping, where you take sort of bits of ideas and the best bits of ideas and put them together. And we looked at doing that and how we could bring them back into ResDiary. And that really produced a sort of good culture, good sort of way of working and creative, innovative approach to working as well. And I think that that's another thing that I'd like to get back to.
Well, thank you for sharing those insights as well. And congratulations on finishing that MBA too. I'm about to get started and embark on my MBA journey next year. So I'd love to have a chat with you another time, Colin, about any tips for getting through that. But just one question for you to round out the episode today. I'd love to know who you'd like to hear on the show.
Yeah, so the first is my self-interest person, first of all. So Jordan Ford, he's our CEO of Dishcult, so it's a sister company. I think it'd be really interesting to speak to him. He's got quite a good journey through industries as well, just to hear about Dishcult and our consumer play. It's a sister company of Accor, so that's my self-interest one. I'll get that one out of the way first. The second one's probably one of the usual suspects. I think I'd like to hear from Jack Dorsey. I think he's obviously best known for Twitter, but he also found Square, who we've got an integration with. And I think that hearing what his journey towards sort of payments, why is he gone down that approach? They also do solutions for restaurants as well. So there's the hospitality link, I think, there.
And they just bought Afterpay as well.
Yeah, they've just bought Afterpay for a huge sum of money. So, I think for me, it's like, why does he do what he does? Why the sort of leap from Twitter into sort of payments and, that kind of thing? I mean, I can understand why he does it, but, and how does he do it still? Or why does he still get out of bed in the morning? Because obviously he's hugely successful, and what just drives him on? I think that would be really interesting to hear.
Yeah, fantastic. I'd love to hear from Jack Dorsey as well. So thank you so much, Colin, for joining me on the program. Thank you for your insights and sharing your experience with ResDiary and the growth of your career from the early days as a senior software developer with ResDiary. And I know you had time even before that we touched on too. But thank you for joining me, and I'm really excited to see the future of ResDiary and how things develop moving forward.
All right, thanks, James. Really appreciate it. Cheers.
This program is hosted by James Henderson. Voiceovers were by Angus Brennan and Shim Phelan. Thanks to our distribution team, and a special thanks to you for tuning in every week. This program was produced by H Media. We'll see you soon.